Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome in to another edition of the Zoneheads Orlando podcast. Thanks so much for hanging out with me here today. Our episode brought to you by my audio production business, AuthenticAudioPro.com. I was looking up prices the other day just to see how much does it cost if your small business owner says, hey, I want to make a radio ad. I want to make an ad for a podcast. That just to make it, not even to partner with a media conglomerate to actually distribute that ad, but just to create the 30-second or 60-second ad itself. That would run you from $1,000 to about $2,500. That is ridiculous. I've been in the sports media business for the last 12 years. I know how to do this stuff and to do it effectively and professionally, and would never charge anyone that much for one single ad. So hit me up at Brandon Kravitz. You can find me on social, kravitzb@yahoo.com. If you want to shoot me an email, and we'll get set up. AuthenticAudioPro.com if you want to check out the website. It's more than just commercial ads. We can also produce a podcast for you, but I just thought I'd get that out there. I thought that was absolutely crazy. And this is my way of creating an extra revenue stream for myself, but also helping out small businesses all along the way. So we've officially hit the dog days of summer. Greg Rhodes, shout out to him for a great Thursday episode. We went down the full list of things that Orlando sports fans can do as the summer approaches. You know, we're at this point in the year where we don't even have NBA games or NHL games every single night. There was a day, I think it might have been on Monday, when I had absolutely nothing going on. I didn't even realize there was a game 7 in the NHL. The Western Conference has sort of eluded me so far. I'm not the biggest hockey fan in the world, but man, this time of year is it's the first little patch we've hit. You go from football season into the start of baseball, into March Madness, conference tournament play. The NBA is still going on. It just feels like you're getting hit from every direction. And now things are starting to slow down. And for people in this town that love to go to sporting events, your options for that are dwindling as well. UCF baseball is wrapping up. They're in the Big 12 tournament right now as we speak. But there are still things to do. So Greg did a really good job detailing all of that. Orlando City, of course, one of them, Orlando Pride, and how well they've been playing. And the list actually goes deeper than that, which is why I love Greg's episodes every single week, because I learned something from him. I've got my head so deep into what I perceive to be the biggest sports stories. I miss all this cool little stuff, and Greg does a really good job of detailing that for us. So with the dog days of summer coming up, or maybe we're already here, I guess it depends on how you want to label that. My annual beach trip is coming up as well. So I have, ever since I started dating my now wife, we've been doing this probably for the last 10 years, which is kind of crazy to think. She's been going on this beach trip with her family her entire life. I just started within the last decade. Don't quote me on that timeline, but it's in that range. Just started tagging along, and we're headed out to the west coast of Florida. Really excited to spend the week, feet in the sand, kid playing in the water, and drinking by noon, all of that good stuff. So it's always a great time for me to reset. I look at New Year's as the reset, like in a very cliche way. Make resolutions, think about what I want to accomplish and what I want to do for the upcoming year. I use this as like the halftime show, where I'm just kind of kicking back and chilling and reassessing how everything is going and what I want to close out with. So it's an important time of the year for me, and it happens to coincide with there not being a lot going on. So I told all of you last week that the Magic episodes were going to start to wrap up. Well, that is going to happen, not today. So I'm not quite ready to quit the Magic fix here on our Friday Zoneheads Orlando episode, but a little bit of news in the NBA, and then I want to give you a little, not a sneak peek, but a peek back at an interview that I had with Kevin Clark, Orlando Magic super fan, right before the NBA playoffs started. This was somebody that I ran into at the NFL owners meetings. Really cool guy, and he loves the Orlando Magic, loves the Orlando sports scene. And so we talked about that, where his fandom came from, and all of that. And you can also listen to how wrong we were about our Magic Cavs prediction. All NBA rosters were announced. We got no Paolo, no Franz, no surprise, but we will get there. And before you get too upset about it, I'll run down the list. Hard to fit them in when you've got heavy hitters like this. The first team is Giannis, Luka, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jokic, and Jason Tatum. I'd put that starting five up against anybody. Jalen Brunson, Anthony Davis, Kevin Durant, Anthony Edwards, Kawhi Leonard make up the second team. And then the third team is kind of like the Pacers-Kings trade combined with the legends of the NBA, because you've got LeBron and Steph in there, Tyrese Halliburton, Domantas Sabonis, and then we'll throw Devin Booker in there as well. So those guys all made All-NBA. Congrats to them. Victor Wembanyama, some people thought was going to make it in there, did not. When you look at the guys that did make it, hard to get there with him. I think he was close, and the fact that he was even borderline is awfully impressive. Paolo made his first All-Star game. I wouldn't have had him as an All-NBA guy. I just don't think he's quite there yet. We haven't seen the consistent dominant performances that are going to get you there. And Franz didn't even make the All-Star team, so I don't think he was in consideration. But shout out to Jalen Suggs, all defensive second team. So you're starting to see this team get a little bit of recognition, and I think that's only going to hit another gear next year. I did want to mention that I'm looking at the four teams that are left in the NBA playoffs, and I found a through line that I think is quite telling when talking about roster construction in the NBA. So these two things sort of tie in together. Mike Giannetti of SpotTrack.com, he put out a list of the top 15 paid players per year this season in the NBA. The top 15, and only one of them made it to the Final Four. So only one of those players play for the Timberwolves, Mavericks, Celtics, or Pacers. And it's Rudy Gobert at $41 million a year, which I would not have been able to guess that had I not seen the list. But you've got names like Curry, Ron, Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant, Giannis, Dame, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard. I think what you're seeing right now is the NBA go through a stage of transition where these top paid guys, the top stars, these are all the top stars in the NBA. These guys are starting to age out a little bit. Health has played a factor in with some of these players, Giannis and Joel Embiid, who are on this list. So age and health. And I think what you've also seen is that over the years in the LeBron era, it was the cool thing to do was to find a fellow legend in the game and team up with them. And they've put together so many great years of NBA service that they end up getting these monster contracts. Well, what happens when you have two players that play together that take up over 50% of your salary cap and they start to age out just a little bit? All these guys are still really good, but they're not as good as they once were, and they're not as good as the guys that are currently in their prime, like Tatum and Halliburton, Anthony Edwards, Karl Anthony Towns. There's just a freshness to those players. So you've got older players that chose to team up that wreck salary caps, and now they're starting to get older. What also is impacted by this, and this is where the Magic do come into play here, is that when you pay older players that much and you pay two or three guys as much as the teams like the Lakers and the Suns are doing, you leave no room to have a good bench. And one of the things that we have seen in the playoffs is that the better benches have been making it further. The Indiana Pacers lead the league in terms of teams that made it to the playoffs and their production in the postseason. The Pacers lead all playoff teams in points per game off the bench with 33. The Minnesota Timberwolves are number 4 with 25. The Dallas Mavericks were number 5 with 23. And the Boston Celtics are the only team that ranks outside of the top 5 of the 4 teams remaining in terms of points per game off the bench. your full roster matters now more than it ever has. Every team has guys they feel great about at the top, but who else is helping? What's that complementary cast look like? And I think bench scoring helps to tell that story a little bit. Here's where this is a really good sign for the Orlando Magic, is that they are number 2 on this list. And they only played one playoff series, but 28 points per game off the bench for the Magic in the playoffs. That's number 2 only to the Indiana Pacers. So in terms of roster construction and build, I do think this tells you that the Magic are in a good spot. You might not want to see them shake up that roster too much. I think the Final Four for this league between the Pacers, Celtics in the East, the Timberwolves and the Mavs in the West, it's great for the league. Maybe not right now, but I do think that this benefits long-term. The NBA is no longer a league of the obvious. We're seeing some of the unpredictability in the NBA that we love in other sports. We get that in baseball. We definitely get that in the NFL. Don't get it as much in college, but I think college football fans sort of have come to terms with that a long while ago. The Celtics are the only team left that feels super obvious. And I think this is also great for the Orlando Magic, because in the past, you had to do what the Celtics are doing in order to win a championship. You had to be there knocking on the door. Look at the Miami Heat, even the Heat with the big 3 with Wade, LeBron, and Bosh. They didn't win right away. They had to knock at the door for a minute. Michael Jordan, go back to the start of his career. He didn't just start winning championships right away. He had to go and fail in the playoffs, and then had to go up against the bad boy Pistons and figure out how to get past Boston. And he had to knock at the door year after year in order to eventually break it down. And right now what we're seeing with Minnesota and Dallas and Indiana, like these teams, Minnesota was a first-round exit last year. The Mavs didn't make the playoffs last year, and the Pacers didn't make the playoffs last year. So you're able to turn things around a little bit quicker than maybe you were in the past. All right, we're going to take a quick pause in the action, and then my interview, my conversation with Orlando Magic superfan Kevin Clark from just a couple of weeks back. Stay tuned.